Bio. I have a bachelor's in Jewish education from Hebrew College of Boston, Bachelor of Science in Education from Boston University, and an MA from Mundelein College, now part of Loyola University in Chicago in comparative religions. Perpetual student, are you? For over 20 years, I taught, among other subjects, courses in ancient civilization in private schools in Chicago. My late husband, who had an MA and a PhD from Harvard University, was dean of Spertus College in Chicago and a scholar in first century history. Since coming to Israel in 1992, I worked at the Bible Lands Museum as coordinator of guides, developing courses for the education of the guides, and also was in charge of the Wednesday night lecture series, which is open to the public and is still going. Here's her accomplishments right here. I'm mother of 4, grandmother of 13, and great-grandmother of 2 who live in Netivot, near Sderot. Any problem with rockets in Netivot? Yeah, they do have, don't they? Yeah. Not a good place to be at this time of the year, right? Okay. So, Celia, please come and share with us, will you?
Okay, I'm happy to be here and very happy to see all of you. I met some of you already, and it was very nice. I'm going to talk about the Bible Lands Museum, which you may have seen. It's opposite the Israel Museum, and I do have a slide of it so you can see what the building looks like. It's very modest. It's built opposite the Israel Museum. When Teddy Kollek originally gave the land to the people who were building the Bible Lands Museum, he thought that he would have a whole row of museums there: Israel Museum, Bible Lands Museum, Science Museum, and other museums in that area, which eventually maybe we'll have, which is very nice. And the Bible Lands Museum, well, let me show you the slide, and you'll see what it is. As I say, it's a modest building. You come into it, and then you walk down as if you're coming into an archaeological dig. And that's how they made the museum. Also, it's a very beautiful place. And it's warm in the winter, and it's cool in the summer. And there's lots to see there. I brought in quite a few slides. I'll explain a lot of the artifacts that are there. Most of the things that are there are approximately 4,000, 5,000 years old. And they're very interesting. Each one has a little story to tell about the people who made it. So let me show you that, and then a map of the area that we're talking about. Bible lands refers to the lands that are mentioned in the Bible. So that's the reason we chose that particular name. The lands that are mentioned in the Bible, and especially among the prophets who knew all the politics that were going on at that time and understood it very well. And the people each had their own culture. They all had many great civilizations, and almost all of those civilizations have disappeared. The Egyptians, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Eritreans, and so forth. They all had magnificent, huge civilizations that disappeared completely. The only one that's left is Jerusalem and the Jews that are here still. So I'm just going to turn this on. And I hope that you can see it. There's a little bit too much light here, but we can't help that. Okay. That's just the facade of the museum. As I say, it's a very modest building, and it goes down in 3 stories so that you can see it. What they have now in the Bible Lands Museum is on the bottom floor, ancient music, and you'll be surprised to learn that King David was not the only king who played an instrument and wrote poetry. Apparently, that was part of the education of the kings in ancient times also. So I was surprised to find it out myself when they made this exhibit. And we also have the 3 monotheistic religions depicted with various artifacts from the Muslim, from the Christian, and from the Jewish. So the 3 faces of monotheism is there, and they have a catalog which really describes all those religions, and it's a big help too. So anybody who comes into the museum, first of all, they have to like old things. But they also have to have a good mind to think about what they're looking at. Okay? Let me see now here. Oh, dear. I hate to say this, but I can't really get a good focus. Let me see if I can get a better focus here. With the light, you can't see the people, and that's a shame. Yeah, well, yeah, nothing much to do about it. You just have to take my word that this shows, well, you can see Mrs. Borofsky, and her husband is Dr. Elie Borofsky, and he was the founder of the museum. He had a magnificent collection in Toronto, Canada, and he was an antiquities dealer, and he had a wonderful eye for all these things. And it's mainly his exhibit. He has friends who gave him artifacts, but most of the things he bought himself. He grew up in Poland and then became interested in ancient civilizations. He learned about cuneiform, and he learned about cylinder seals. Now, I brought a little cylinder seal with me, which I'll pass around to show you. In ancient times, this was your MasterCard or your Visa card. For about 3,000 years, everybody wore a seal upon their body, on their arm, on their cloak, on what they were wearing, and you couldn't go out without it. This was your identification. Now, probably you're all biblical students, I know. You've heard about the story of Judah and Tamar, maybe, where after he has relations with her, and he says, "What shall I give you?" And he wants to give her a couple of goats. She says, "Give me your seal," and she has him. That's it. So the whole idea of the Bible Lands Museum is to enrich our understanding of the Bible by understanding the cultures from which the people came. So having a seal was very important. Now, of course, you know that the Song of Shir HaShirim, is a very romantic story. It's the relation between the God and the Jews. But when it says, "Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm," if you know that everybody's wearing them all the time, it's a much more meaningful thing. So I'll show you this, but I want to tell you that these seals were used for this reason. I'm going to show you a map of the area where Abraham came from. That was called Sumer, ancient Mesopotamia. And they didn't have any natural resources there, mostly mud. They were the land between the two rivers. Mesopotamia means land between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. And they built their houses of mud brick. They built their temples of mud brick glazed. They wrote on clay tablets. And that was the first writing of any civilization. That's where civilization of this whole planet began, is in ancient Sumer, the place where Abraham came from. It was there long before he came from it, but it was already a great civilization. Civilization means cities, people living in cities. And up until that time, people lived, they were nomads, or they were hunters and gatherers, or something else. But once they were able to live in cities, that's a time where people could do art or pottery or sewing or agriculture, and especially agriculture. So they knew how to bring in the waters from the rivers and grow and become the breadbasket of the ancient world. And then they could trade their grain for whatever else they needed, and that's how civilization developed in that particular area, and from there spread out to other areas in the Middle East. And that's where civilization began. There was nothing going on in America, there was nothing going on in Europe, only in the land between the two rivers, Sumer. Okay? So I'll pass it around, you can look. All these cylinder seals had to be rolled out on clay. That's why everybody had to have one. If you had a document, it had to be signed by rolling it out on clay. And usually they're made of very, very hard stone, and you need a lot of craftsmanship in order to carve them so that they're carved in the negative and come out in the positive. So any of you that do art, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. All right, now I'm going to show you some of the slides, and you can see that about things that are in the museum. Yeah. You can't really see much at all. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. Well, I'll just have to tell you things, that's all. Imagine. Okay. Should have some better picture. I had a little better picture before. This is a magnificent map. When you get to the museum, you can see a magnificent topographical map on the wall there that shows you the ancient Middle East. And of course, that's the most volatile place in the world at the present time and in ancient times, because the land between the two rivers is now Iraq. The land to the east of that is Persia, Iran. The land to the west of it is the land that God showed to Abraham, where he went up the Fertile Crescent. So looking at a good map is a help. Goes up the Fertile Crescent and down to the land that God is going to show him, which was the land of Canaan. And from there, when he came to the land of Canaan, he found a famine and went into Egypt. In Egypt, he was greeted by the Pharaoh. So look back into Genesis and you'll see a very interesting story where he tells his wife, say that you're my sister because then they're going to kill me and they'll take you away, and this way, perhaps, we'll preserve our lives. So everybody's interested to see how come Abraham is telling a lie right away in the beginning of the Bible. But if you know ancient civilizations, you know that the potentates of the ancient world wanted to increase the prestige of their harem by having a beautiful woman from a very wealthy and important family. And he would have taken away Sarah, who was, the Bible tells us, was very pretty, and he would have killed Abraham, and that would have been the end of the Jewish people. So that's what happened. And then that story, as I say, knowing the ancient civilizations gives you another aspect of the biblical story. All right, I don't know how I'm going to be able to show you the things here, but see if you can. Yeah. You think move it closer? It's hard to see a slideshow when you can't see the slides. Yeah, he needs a little help there with that. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just tell you a few more things. All right, ancient civilizations. What are we talking about? First of all, you have the Hittites. Well, until 160 years ago, nobody knew who the Hittites were. They knew that the Bible says that Abraham bought the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the cave of the patriarchs, from a Hittite. And we know that David was married to Bathsheba, who was the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So we knew the name Hittite, but we had no idea that they had a great civilization in Anatolia, Turkey. So any of you who go to Turkey now, you will find that every museum has artifacts from the Hittite civilization. People started to dig up. Generally speaking, the early archaeologists were all Christians who wanted to affirm the Bible. And by looking into the countries where the biblical stories took place, they thought that they could find interesting artifacts and affirm the stories of the Bible. So these early Christian archaeologists started digging in Turkey, and sure enough, they found cities, temples, storage houses, many, many artifacts, walls that were covered with carvings of 1,000 different gods marching to a ceremony. 1,000 gods the Hittites had, which was a lot even for ancient civilizations. Yeah. So the Hittites were in Anatolia, Turkey, present-day Turkey. Going down south a little bit, we had other civilizations that came along and became great. The Assyrians, who wanted to conquer the richest land that they could, which was the Egyptian. Why? Egypt had gold coming up from Nubia. They were fabulously wealthy. Their country was protected by the Mediterranean and by the desert, and so they were in a good situation. But when the Assyrians said, well, we're going to conquer Egypt, that meant that they would get rich, just like Saddam Hussein wanted to conquer Kuwait, and he looted it, right? So that was their idea. So the Assyrians went out in a very, very harsh way to conquer any lands that they could and increase their own prestige. And they would put all of their victories on the walls of their palaces. That was the newspaper of the ancient times. So you wanted to show that you were really great. You carved in all of the places that you conquered, and you showed the people, and you showed the great victories that you had. So many palaces have those things. Now, artifacts from the palace at Nineveh, for instance, a few years ago, was going to be sold to a curator at the Bible Lands Museum. They sent her a picture of it. They said, is this authentic? And she said, yes, but you're not allowed to buy it because it comes from Iraq. Nineveh is in Iraq, the Assyrians. And she said, the law is now that any artifacts that are found in a country have to be returned to that country. You can't just sell them. Apparently, they were looting that palace there, taking artifacts and selling them all over the world. And they were being sold all over the world. And not for little money, for lots and lots of money. So The Assyrian civilization wanted to conquer the Egyptian. As they came up along the Fertile Crescent and down to the land of Israel, they found 10 tribes in the north. And they took away the 10 tribes in the north, and they scattered them and dispersed them all over the world. And nobody knows exactly where are the lost 10 tribes. If you go into any library, you see a whole shelf that says lost 10 tribes are here, lost 10 tribes are there, and we don't know exactly where, but we have clues. Now, in the last few years, Israel has been getting a whole group of people from northern India, and they are the B'nai Menashe. And the B'nai Menashe are lovely people who have a history of being the tribe of Menashe, which was conquered by the Assyrians in about 600 before the Common Era, and scattered. And they scattered up until India there. And just about 2 months ago, I was up in Carmiel, and I saw 25 of those little children singing a song that they knew from their history in their language, which is Mizo, and they were singing a song about coming back to Jerusalem. Yeah. So that's the B'nai Menashe, and who knows where else people will show up that have some connection. Actually, in Afghanistan, there are a group of people there who have customs and ceremonies similar to the Jewish ceremonies and customs. So there's lots that's going on in the world. All right. Another great civilization after the Assyrians came along the Babylonians. And they became very, very strong, and they became conquerors also. They had to go along the same route. I can't show you the map. Maybe I can now. Okay, that was the best you could get as far as the, yeah. Okay, well, you can't really see it very well here. Whoops. Well, I think we just have to imagine, okay? I'll just tell you. To turn it on. And I'll tell you as much as I can. All right, the Babylonians came along. They came very, very mighty. And when I say mighty, I'm saying that in 600 before the Common Era, the city of Babylon had 600,000 people, according to archaeologists who have been digging there. They had 42 temples that they had uncovered. They had a huge area, bigger than 10 football fields, with a ziggurat, which is a temple, to the god Marduk, who was the god of that particular city. They had other gods also. They had a pantheon of gods, a lot of different gods. But the one that was the god of the city was Marduk, the god of Babylon. And of course, that's the place where they say they had the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. If you can imagine a place that's mostly desert and dry, and you have hanging gardens, that's something fabulous to see, right? All right, so then the Babylonians came along. And the Babylonians came to Jerusalem, and they wanted to conquer Jerusalem, and they were successful in fighting because they had a huge, mighty army, and they surrounded Jerusalem, and they razed Jerusalem and destroyed the first temple that had been built by King Solomon. When they destroyed that temple, they took away with them to Babylon, which was the way that they did things. They moved populations in order to not to have too much rebellion. So they would take the king and his family, the princes and so forth, the rabbis and scholars, the merchants and business people, all the important people of the court, were all taken away to Babylon, and not an easy route. You have to figure that they went up from Jerusalem, up towards northern Syria, and down along the river route to Babylon, which is like the middle of Iraq, and there they let the people stay. Along came the Persians, one group after another. Of course, it took many years. Along came the Persians. The Persians under King Darius told all the Jewish people that were living in Babylon, you can go back to your country, you can rebuild your temple if you want, and you only have to pay taxes twice a year to Persia, and we'll put a governor over you, a Persian governor, but you have your own autonomy. The Jews that were living in Babylon under the Persians were living nicely also. They had their own autonomy because the Persians, instead of having a pantheon of different gods and many stories about those gods, had a religion called Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism, generally speaking, is the fight between good and evil. A lot of stories about it, and some parts of it are good and some are not. But it was not the same type of a religion. So they didn't put so much power over the peoples that were living in their areas. But what was their area? The Persians had conquered from India all the way to the east, across the whole of the ancient Middle East, up to North Africa, under Egypt, although Israel, of course, were all under the Persian rule. They tried to conquer in Greece, but they were turned back at Salamis. Some of you remember your ancient history, right? At Salamis, they had a big fight, and the Greeks, because they were fighting on their own soil, that was one reason, I think, fought back against the Persians, and they wouldn't let them come in. Well, the Persians, of course, were trying to get into Greece, because it's in the Mediterranean, in boats, and they weren't that skilled at using their boats. And the Greeks were very skilled at using boats because they lived in a country that is surrounded by water, and they knew what to do. And so the Persians had to go back to Persia. And they tell a very cute story that Darius, the king of Persia, would be sitting at his breakfast table, and he had a servant who was supposed to come over to him every day and tell him, remember the Greeks, so that he would go back and conquer them. So we have those stories. So all of these civilizations that lived in the ancient world, the ancient Middle East, had connections one with the other. They had influences one upon the other. And the Bible Lands Museum has artifacts that were made by hand by people in each of these civilizations that showed what was important to them. Now, in my work there, I found two things that I felt were the most important. One was religion. Not the religion of monotheism, but the religion, because that was the most important thing to them, and art. We have a vase there that's 7,000 years old. That's a beautiful shape. It's colored with red stripes in a beautiful design. And this is something made by hand. Who knows how long it took a person to make it, because there was no wheel or anything like that. And that was all a handmade object. So that's a 7,000-year-old object made by hand, expressing a person's love for beauty. It may have been used in religious ceremonies too, and it might very well have been. Let's see if we can see anything else on the slides at all. If not, I guess I can talk, but we'll see. Okay. Maybe some slides are better than others. All right, so this is very easy to see, even if you can't see it clearly. These are cylinder seals. The museum has about 1,600 of the cylinder seals, but any museum that you go to that has archaeological treasures has cylinder seals, because, as I say, everybody wore it. That was your identity. That was how you marked documents. That showed ownership. That was very important. So, and the seal is at the bottom there, and every museum rolls it out on plastiline or plastic so that you can see what it looks like. So that's very good. Another thing that we have at the museum are little lamps. And you can't see these too well, but we once had an exhibit. There's a dentist here in Jerusalem who has a collection of lamps from all over and from all ages, starting from maybe 6,000 years ago up until the Christian period, to the Byzantine period, and Roman period. And each one of them, of course, it's made of clay. It's a small little object, and of course you have to have a lamp, because how would you get along without light, you know? So everybody had lamps, and everybody was able to write something on the lamps in order to express their culture, their civilization, or whatever they wanted. We have lamps that have crosses on them. We have lamps that have Jewish stars on them. We have lamps that have menorahs on them. We have lamps that have pictures of different gods on them. So it's something that people had in the ancient world. This you don't know what it is, and you won't ever know. It's a crown that's in the museum, and it probably was used on top of a statue of a god. It is a horned helmet, so you can see little horns. It's very pretty. The binding of it here has lapis lazuli, pretty stones in. The back of it has pearls on it. So it was something that was highly decorated and used as a head covering for a god where people would bow down to that particular god. I didn't bring in any gods here. What? I said hallelujah. Right. That's good. Always good to say hallelujah. All right, now this is an interesting creature. This is called a cherub in some books. This is a composite creature that this particular one has a face of a bird, wings of an eagle, the body of a bull or a lion, legs of an eagle, and a tail of perhaps of a snake. But all of these powers in this fantastic animal have these combination of powers give religious power to the creature. So there we have quite a few of these that show this particular one is in ivory. So the things that remain are things made of clay, made of ivory, made of metal. Not too many things remain. So we're very lucky when we have things that remain that can tell us a lot about the civilization. There's some more cylinder seals. I can't show you what's on them, so I won't. All right. Now here you have a worshiper. This is not a god. This is a worshiper. And if you try this at home, you'll see it's very nice. You stand like that, you press your hands against your stomach, and you look up like that, and you have a very, very reverential feeling. So in the temples of the ancient world, we found lots and lots of these statues on shelves looking up at probably the effigy of a god. And they were worshipers. They're stand-ins for you and me. And if I want to go out and play golf or do some shopping, I can't stand and pray all day. So I would put my little statue in the temple, and that statue would be praying and asking for pity and hoping for good luck and whatever else you had. Now, how do we know that? Because we have a couple of these little statues in the museum that have a skirt that is covered with cuneiform writing, and cuneiform writing is the writing of the ancient world. And it has a skirt covered with writing, and it tells, I'm here to pray for my mistress, and so forth and so on, and so on. So we have, those are the worshipers, the stand-ins. So when you don't want to go to church one day, don't forget that. Okay, this you can't possibly see either, but it's something very pretty. It's a big stone monument, a funeral monument, which has a man and a woman on it, and they're both sitting at a table, and the table has covered with pita bread, flat breads, and he has an ear of corn in his hand, which shows either the agricultural life or it's a sign of fertility and good life. And the woman has a spindle in her hand, which shows the craftsmanship of women. Now, don't forget, in the ancient world, the craftsmanship of women was an extremely important thing. You couldn't have a garment unless women were weaving it. You couldn't have pottery. A lot of times were made by women. You couldn't have something to cook in unless somebody did something. So the craftsmanship of women was extremely important, and the spindle is the symbol of it. So when you come to the museum, I hope you will, you'll see this very lovely picture where the woman and the man are the same size, and they're sitting at a table together, and that's their funerary, like their funeral monument. Very nice. And I say they're the same size, which is interesting because in the Egyptian, we have a picture from a tomb, an Egyptian tomb, where the man is looking like 7 feet tall and very handsome, and the woman is about 2 feet tall beside him. So, yeah. This particular thing is a ivory monument, ivory plaque that was put into the beds. Now, if you wanted to have really expensive furniture, or the king, or mostly the wealthier or the more privileged people, would have a bed that was set in with ivory plaques, because ivory was extremely expensive and hard to get to, and especially if it was carved so beautifully. This one has a cow which is pushing her little calf to make sure that he's getting all the milk he needs. It's a lovely little thing. The prophet Amos said in the book of Amos, he says, "Woe to those people that lie upon beds of ivory." And he's saying, they don't think about the poor people. What is these beds of ivory? You can't make a bed of ivory. It would fall apart. It's a bed that's inlaid with all these ivory plaques on them, because those are the luxury items of that particular time. So he's saying, what's the matter with you? You lie on beds of ivory and you don't think about the poor people around you? The prophet Amos. Look it up. It's a beautiful little statement there. And we have quite a few of these ivory plaques in the museum. that were found in a treasure of Hazael up in the northern part of Israel, about 600 BCE. Well, this is also hard to see, but that's another one of those fantastical creatures with a lion's body and a bull's face and wings, so we'll just forget about him. And this is the city of Babylon. I'll leave that for a second. We have models of places that were made by the architectural students at the Hebrew University under the supervision of archaeologists who had dug in those particular places. So if you see something in our museum, it's always authentic. We have no reproductions. We sometimes have a picture here and there, but everything that you're looking at is the authentic thing. And so these archaeologists came to the museum and they said, we've dug in Babylon and this is what we found, 43 temples, a city that had probably 600,000 people in it, and this huge plaza for Marduk. All right, this is interesting. This is an upper northern Syria, southern Anatolia, where Turkey and Syria meet, is the top of the Mesopotamian area, and that's where you realize that all of the mothers of the Bible, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, were Mesopotamian ladies. We do have some heads of Mesopotamian ladies from that period, from the time of Abraham, and you can see how they looked, their features. They look pretty much like you and me, except they had good hairdressers, and you can see that they have either like curls around their head or somebody fixed up their hair very nicely. And Rebecca was one of these Mesopotamian ladies from northern Mesopotamia. Abraham left Ur-Kasdim down south in the land between the two rivers, went up the river route of the Tigris River, came up north to Haran, and that's where God said, I'm going to show you the place where you're going to, that's going to be your land. And so even in Haran today, they have a place called the Well of Abraham. And all of the Arabs come there, and they take that water, and that's holy water to them, from the Well of Abraham. If they want to have a baby, or somebody is sick and you want them to get better, you take water from the Well of Abraham in Haran. The city of Haran is still there. It's not as big a city as it used to be, but it's still there. And this is sort of outside the city, too. Now, Rebecca, who came from this area, had the same kind of jars that other women in that area used. And so you see that this particularly beautiful one has like a long neck with a very distinctive kind of a spout on it. And that's maybe the kind that Rebecca was carrying at the well when we have the story about Eliezer who comes to the well and finds Rebecca there. So perhaps. This is an incense shovel. And this is from the Roman period. So this is the early Christian Roman period, early Christian period. And that would be an incense shovel. So we have quite a few objects in the museum from then. The museum, as I say, covers a lot of territory, covers a lot of time and a lot of territory. Time-wise, we start with prehistory, and we have flints. We have from the time of, 3,500 BC, when civilization began and people started writing, going up to the time of Abraham, which is about 1800 BCE, going further up in history to the time of Ramses II in Egypt, Moses, and then Ramses II in Egypt. And then we have the Persian period, the Assyrians, Babylonians, as I said, and other groups of people that came down to this area in the Middle East. And finally, we end up in the museum in the Greek and the Roman period and the early Christian. So we do have many artifacts from all of these periods in history and from all of these places in ancient history. So, as I said, you have to like old things. This is a very interesting image. This is another one of those little ivory plaques that shows a woman looking out of a window. And that reminds us of many Bible stories. The wife of David, Michal, was looking out of a window when he came up to Jerusalem with the Holy Ark, and he was dancing in the streets, and she was looking at him very, very argumentatively. She didn't like it, but she was looking out of a window. Then we have, of course, the mother of Sisera, when they had the battle with the Sisera. So she was waiting for him to come back with wonderful clothes for her and perhaps a few harem girls and so forth. He never came back. He was killed by Yael. But this idea of somebody looking out the window is interesting. This is such an image, that you can't forget. And the tops of the columns there are a very typical kind of a column which you find on your 5-shekel piece. You look at the 5-shekel piece, the back of the 5-shekel piece, it has the top of that column. Now, in the Bible Lands Museum, near our model of the First Temple period, we have the top of a column, a stone column, which has the same thing on it. And if you go down to the park near the Begin Center, there's a fountain there that's a very beautiful fountain with lions around it. If you haven't seen it, it's worth going to see. And it also, the artist who thought of it, he was a German artist, he thought of having the same image as on some of these ancient things. So you see it over and over. And look at your 5-shekel piece and you'll see it too. Now, how did people know about things that happened in the ancient world? They knew about it because merchants went and brought back goods and things. People had a hard time traveling, but when we have these little models, or maybe they were votive offerings of a merchant, he wants to give something to the temple of his god to show that his gratitude in coming back from a long, long journey. So he would make a little model of a wagon with wheels, with donkeys pulling it or oxen pulling it. And so we have a few of those in the museum also that show us how the merchants traveled and and then we have a lot of things that show what they brought back. Now here's a very interesting clay tablet. This is the first one I've shown you that is written in cuneiform. Cuneiform is the kind of a script which is made by taking a reed from the river and pressing it into clay in order to make the language of the times. Now, you have an ABC for German and French and so forth, Spanish. So you have cuneiform for Elamite, Old Persian, Akkadian, and all those other languages. So when you study about the Hittites, you have to know about the cuneiform. If you study about the Assyrians, you must know about the cuneiform. Our curator at the Bible Lands Museum, Dr. Joan Goodnick-Westenholz, is one of the foremost world experts on Babylonian writing, and she's working on a dictionary at the University of Chicago. She goes every summer to work on a dictionary of Babylonian. So, So this particular tablet tells about 8 days in the temple of ancient Larsa. When Abraham left Ur, which is the southern Mesopotamia, he next came to a large city called Larsa, and we have many objects from Larsa. So one of these objects is this particular tablet that says 8 days in the temple. The priests, who were the most educated people, they were the ones who could read and write. They would look out at the top of a ziggurat, which is a stepped pyramid temple, which is the kind of temple that they had, which we have a model of at the museum. And if they could see the star Venus in the sky on the 15th day of Shabbatu, they would start their holiday with every day devoted to a different god or goddess. If they couldn't see the star on that day, they would intercalate another whole month into the calendar so that the harvest season, the planting season, the harvest season, the new year would all come out at the right time. That particular method of calendar, when the Jews went to Babylon, they learned from the Babylonians about the calendar, about mathematics, about astronomy, which the Babylonians were very gifted in, and the Jewish calendar. If you ever look at a Hebrew Jewish calendar, you'll notice that this year was a leap year, which meant that we had an extra month put in for that particular reason, because the Jewish calendar runs with the solar and lunar months. The Arab calendar runs on a lunar month, which means that sometimes their Ramadan can come out at this time of the year and sometimes at that time of the year. It's 29 days around the year. With the Jewish calendar, you end up with a few days left over, so you have to put in another month. It shows a bunch of kids in the museum, and they're looking at some artifacts that we borrowed from the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, which are part of the Ishtar Gate. Some of you know that. The Ishtar Gate is a fabulously beautiful thing. You've seen it. It's glazed brick, blue and gold, huge. What happened was, of course, that German archaeologists came to Babylon and found the Ishtar Gate and took it all apart and moved it all up to Germany, and that's where it is. But when we had an exhibit of the royal cities of the ancient world, we asked them if we could take a couple of panels, and they sent us the panels with these two mythical creatures that would be on the wall of the Ishtar Gate. These have powers, many different powers that are going to protect the city of Babylon from being conquered. So they put it all on the gate. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful, and it still looks as beautiful probably as when it was brand new 5,000 years ago, something. Huh? So here are some children listening to all this talk about the Mushushu, that particular mythical creature. Now here are some of those worshippers. Remember I told you? They were on benches. So every museum probably has a few of them. And there they are looking up very reverentially. Some are men, some are women. They all were more beautifully colored. Everything looks beige in the museum now after so many thousands of years. But you can imagine they were all highly colored. The eyes were inlaid with either shell or jewels. You can see how their robes were made. You can see how they dressed. There's so many interesting things that you find out just by looking at little artifacts in the museum. Now this is one of the great treasures of the museum. It's a broken vase. And I'll tell you why it's a great treasure. It's a vase that's made of alabaster, which is a kind of a white stone. However, this particular vase has a lot of blush of pink or purple on it. What was inside of it? It has 3 lines written in Akkadian, Persian, and Elamite on one side, and it has a hieroglyph, Egyptian writing, on the other side. So here's one vase with 4 languages on it, and they all say the same thing. This is a gift from the Pharaoh of Egypt to Darius, the king of Persia, in the 5th year of his reign, because it's a tribute from a subservient king to a king who is above him. And what is he sending him? Something more precious than diamonds. He's sending him purple dye, D-Y-E. How do you make purple dye? You take a murex shell, and you need about 2,000 murex shells to make 1 gram of this purple dye. You extract from the head of the murex shell a little gland, and that has argamon and tchelet. It has purple and blue. It comes out purple, and you leave it in the sun a while, and it becomes this gorgeous blue of the Jerusalem sky. So he's sending him something that's so precious in this big vase. It's about this big. Only the king is allowed to wear the royal purple or the royal blue. We say it today. Royal. Why do we say royal blue? It sounds very nice. It's because only the king was allowed to wear those colors. And once you know that it was very difficult in the ancient world to make beautiful colors, all the stories that we hear about somebody who has beautiful colored clothes becomes more important. How about the story of Joseph? His father gave him a coat of many colors. He gave him something that was so precious that nobody else in the family had it, a coat of many colors. That's what I say. The Bible Lands Museum enriches our understanding of the Bible by knowing the civilizations surrounding it. You see? And so here you have a vase filled with this purple dye sent from Egypt all the way around to Persia, to either Persepolis, which was one of their main cities, or Shushan, Susa, which was another of their famous cities. And you would have a vase with precious object in it with purple dye. Purple and blue. Don't forget when we have the story in the Bible about the clothing of the high priest or the coverings of the Ark of the Covenant. The purple dye is mentioned, and the tchelet and the argamon, all those colors are mentioned. These were very beautiful things. These were not just ordinary things. Oh, that's the ziggurat. That is what a stepped pyramid temple looks like. It's huge. You can't see, there are little people walking up the stairs there. But it's a huge thing made of mud brick. Actually, when in the 1991 Gulf War, the first Gulf War, the pilots, American pilots, were told not to bomb near Ur because there's remains of a ziggurat there, and it's the only thing that's left of a ziggurat. We have a picture of it in the museum, and you can see how it was made, and some of the bricks are there, and it's really interesting to see. So this is a step pyramid temple, and if you think of the South American step pyramid temples also, there's a similarity in the architectural idea of it. And I talked about Persia, and this is a model of the Apadana in Susa. Now, the city of Shushan, Susa, was one of the main cities of the Persian Empire. It had a beautiful palace there. We had a French archaeologist who came to the museum, and he told the students of the architectural school of Bezalel how to build this particular palace that he had unearthed in Susa. And it was huge. And if you go back to the story of the scroll of Esther, and you read about the palace, the audience hall, where the king was having his party, you hear that they had marble floors and hangings of purple and drinking out of gold vessels, and the floor had marble and porphyry and precious stones built into it. The Persians were very wealthy. They had conquered from India, as I said, all the way across the ancient world. They had 127 different provinces. Every one of those provinces was under their rule. Every one of those provinces was paying taxes twice a year to the Persian Empire, and the Persians were very, very wealthy. Here's a lady swimming. What is she doing swimming? I don't know. It's an Egyptian artifact. It's a beautiful ivory carving. It just shows the artistry and the creativity of the ancient world. This is an ivory lady holding a cup in her hand which probably had kohl in it, K-O-H-L, which is that black stuff that you put around your eyes to protect you from the sun, to take the glare away, for beauty. Or any Egyptian movies that you've seen, they always wear black around their eyes, right? Or any football players put it under their cheeks so they don't have the glare. So here, this is just an Egyptian artifact. So I have a few of that. These are little scarab stones. Now, I think about 2 weeks ago, somebody was excavating in Jerusalem, and they found a little tiny thing about this big, very, very tiny, and it had writing on it. Did you read it in the newspaper? Huh? What? Yeah. Yeah. It had somebody's name on it. So some of these things, you know, that you sweep out of your house if you found it in your house, these are very, very important. And so we have many, many small little objects like this that are worth examining, looking into, that have a lot of interesting things about them. This is some of the jewelry of the Persians, gold jewelry. Herodotus, the Greek writer, says when the Persian army came along, he was astounded at the magnificence of their costumes. Each one of the soldiers had gold buttons in the shape of lions on their tunics. And he said, we would be ashamed in Greece of our own entourage if we could have something like the Persians' entourage. Interesting. Again, here is something that's called a kruv, a cherub. We have the name cherubs, you know, cherubs. And this, they think, is probably what they look like. Again, it has the wings of an eagle, right? Important to that. The body of a bull or a lion, and eagle. Some legs are like an eagle's, a bird's feet, and the mind of a person. So you have all of these powers together to make up a cherub. We think of sometimes, you know, it looks like a little baby, but according to the ancient world, this was what a cherub was like. And we have some of these. This happens to be metal. This is from Cyprus. But if you look in the book of Kings, it says when Solomon built the temple, he had 10 stands made to hold a vessel. And the stands had inserts of cherubs, of people, and it had inserts all around. And this one from Cyprus is almost exactly like the description in the book of Kings. It's amazing to see that how similar things were in some parts of the ancient world. This is another Persian object. I told you that the Persians were Zoroastrians. This is an incense burner, and it's made of silver. Now, silver was more precious than gold. They had lots of gold available. From Turkey, they had some gold. From Egypt, much gold. Silver was more precious because it was more rare. And this one happens to be gold, silver gilded. So has both. Has both. Here it shows from the Assyrian wall. I told you they wanted to show how they were great conquerors. So that's how they showed their prisoners. Walking along, wall bent over. That was one of the things that they would show on the walls of their palaces. Again, these are Egyptian artifacts. Everything is made of beauty. This is about the closest I got to showing an actual god, which I don't know for sure if he was an actual god, but they think that that's probably a smiting god called a Hadad. And whatever is made of metal apparently remains, although somebody knocked his ear off, you notice? Yeah. So that's Hadad. Again, the Assyrians, I said, came up the Fertile Crescent along the water route down into the land of Israel and fought in Lachish, which you know where that is, and they fought against the local people here. Now we have pieces of stone from the palace. This was before the time that you couldn't buy it. Dr. Borowski bought it at a public auction. I could tell you a great story, but it's getting late. At any rate, it shows why were the Assyrians so good at conquering? Because they had wicker shields. You see how that shield is made? It's a wicker shield. What happened when the Greeks came here and they tried to fight against the Maccabees? The Maccabees were doing better than them. How come? The Greeks had heavy metal armor, and it was bogged down in the heat. Could you go out on a day like yesterday, maybe, with heavy armor on? So they had to drop all their armor. They dropped their shields. By the time they came to the top of the mountain, the Maccabees could knock them off easily. So you have to know what you're wearing when you go to war. Okay. And this is a very interesting thing. This is called an orthostat. These were kind of carvings that were put into the a building's entrance, perhaps, and they showed important things. These are people carrying an offering, and in their hands they have a bucket. And the interesting thing about the bucket is that we have an actual bucket in the museum, similar to the ones that they're carrying, with a lot of gorgeous, beautiful designs on it that show exactly what it was used for. And it was probably used for libations or some holy ceremonies or something like that. But this reminds you of the caramel wine, you know, that there are two guys carrying the grapes. So, this, many of you probably know who this is. This is Akhenaten. Akhenaten is the Egyptian pharaoh who thought that they should only worship one god. The Egyptians had lots of different gods. However, Akhenaten said, no, only worship the sun god. That's all we need to do is worship the sun god. Set up a whole city along the Nile River with temples, pools, date palms, very nice city, palaces. And he said, from now on, everybody in Egypt only worships one god. So a lot of people say this is the father of monotheism. And you'll see many books written like that. However, it was only one of the many gods. Of course, what he did is he took away the power, the lands, the money of all of the priests. And they were very angry with him. And when he died, they went back to the old way of worshiping many different gods. So Tutankhamun, originally his name was Tutankhamun, and took the name of Ammon, one of the other gods. And Tutankhamun, his nephew of Akhenaten, became a pharaoh. And, okay, I'm going to just show you one more. I'm going to go down to the very end to show you something very nice. There. Okay. There we go. This you can't see very well, unfortunately, but this is from about 300 of the Common Era. It's 333 is, I think, her date. Julia Latranilla, the lady who died. She has a plaque on her sarcophagus with her date, and we know that she was about 35 years old when she died. And it shows in the middle, she has her arms around her husband, and she and her husband are right there in the middle. Underneath them is the first representation of the Chi Rho. The Chi Rho, the first two letters of the name Christ. So you're looking at an early Christian period, I'm saying around 335. This is just after Constantine declared that the whole Roman empire should become Christian, right? So this is one of the early Christians who died, probably very wealthy, had a beautiful sarcophagus built for her, and when you come to I'll tell you, they send over students from the Hebrew University, from all of the universities, to study the sarcophagus of early Christian art, because it has so many interesting things on it. You can't see it from here, but across the top of it, from the lid, is the entrance of Christ on a donkey into Jerusalem, and it shows him healing a blind man, healing a woman who has a hemorrhage, and so forth. It's all depicted there at the top until you come to Peter, and then at the end it has Abraham and Isaac and the angel holding his hand, and next to him is not a ram but a lamb. So this is the early Christian. So they're reinterpreting the Bible story for the Christian religion, the new Christian religion. So the Lamb of God is right next to the story of Abraham. So I think I'm going to close with that. And I hope that you have a chance to come to the museum and see the things that are there. And I hope you've enjoyed the talk.
Any quick questions for Celia?
I told you a lot. There's so much to learn, right? Yes? Of the cherubs? Well, we have mainly the Assyrians and the Babylonians. So you're talking probably about 4,500 years old, that idea. And of course, it's long before the Christian period. There's no way that anything connects up. But apparently these creatures that had a lot of powers in them were very important. And of course, we know that the Ark of the Covenant had cherubs on them, and nobody knows exactly what they look like. They were facing each other, but nobody knows what they look like. I don't think they were animal-like, but we don't know for sure. Nobody knows. There's a lot of things that we don't know, which is the fun of it. Yeah?
Sometimes the pictures are deceiving. How big are the ivory pieces that were in the bed?
They're very small. They're very small. They're inlays that you put into a bed, and they would be around this size. Yeah. So, but they're very beautifully carved.
Thank you again. That was very special.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have something you want to share?
A long time. I didn't know we were in use anymore. I just wanted to say one thing. Went on home visit this afternoon with Pam. Pam and I went out to see someone. Her name is Miriam. And I came back appreciating life and good health much more than when I went. I don't know how many of you sat with people who are close to death or have had a bout with cancer. But if you can just remember to lift up in your prayers Miriam. She's an artist. And about 1 year and 2 months ago, she was married to Shlomo. And beautiful, blonde hair. She's about my height and build, about my age. And she's gorgeous. And in life, it's not what you look at, it's what you see. And Miriam could see into just about anything, any kind of a scenery or any kind of a flower or bouquet, and make a beautiful, beautiful painting from it because she's an artist.